We will pay homage to the Buddha by reciting Namo Tassa 3 times. Namo Tassa Bhagavato Arahato Samma Sambuddhassa. Namo Tassa Bhagavato Arahato Samma Sambuddhassa. Namo Tassa Bhagavato Arahato Samma Sambuddhassa. So today we are going to talk about mindfulness of breathing, anapanasati. Actually, this one is a very common in Buddha's teaching. We can find in many Nikaya. We can also learn from many different texts. So actually, we can have many informations from many different textbooks. Today we will start with Purification. In the Purification, we have very long explanations of anapanasati. It will be more than Visuddhimagga. But some of the information also can be found in Visuddhimagga. Some of them are the same in Visuddhimagga and Purification. Okay, now here I just use the stanza from Purification. Anukachana cha asasan, pasasan, anukachana, sati ajara wikripo, kankana, bheda wikripa patana. Otherwise, asase na bito nasa, pasase brilabe mochana. Pasase na bito nasa, asase brilabe mochana. Cha edi ubagilisa, anapanasati samadhisa, yehi wikripa manasa, nocha chitan wimochati, wimokan apajanando. Te Hondi Barapatiya. This is the stanza mentioned in Purification, page 164. So when we are going to explain part by part, so the first one, the awareness that follows the beginning, the middle, the end of the breath. Okay, this is number one. In this group, in Pali we call asase. The anukachana ja asasam, right? Following the in-breath. So here, number one, maybe the next slide. The awareness that follows the beginning and the middle and the end of the breath. So here we can also understand what is it really called the beginning, the middle, or the end of the in-breath. So according to its commentary, also we have like a regular information. We have normal formal information about the beginning, the middle, and the end of the breath. For example, the beginning of in-breath is around the nostril. The middle of in-breath is in the chest. The end of the in-breath is in the navel. This is the way we can read, we can study in anapanasati. But when we are going to practice practically, we must not follow inside the body. Which means although it mentioned the beginning of in-breath is in the nostril, the middle is in the chest, the end is in the navel, but we must not follow the chest to the navel. We must keep knowing around the nostril. If we follow inside the body, this is also called distractions or restlessness internally. So here we have to know one more thing about the touching points. Frequently, later we also have to talk about touching points. Anyway, so now as we have mentioned, the beginning of in-breath in the nostril, but it also can be upper lip. It depends in the touching point we have. Similarly, we also out-breath. In the case of out-breath, the beginning of the out-breath is in the navel. The middle of the out-breath is in the chest. The end of the out-breath is in the upper lip or at the tip of the nose, or the nostril. So, number two, it mentioned the awareness that follow the beginning, the middle, and the end of the out-breath. So that means our mind will follow the out-breath from the navel, chest, and nostril, or even on the space. Sometimes we follow very far from the nostril. So this is called obstacle, impurity, of breathing meditation. That is why whenever people are going to meditate or new meditator come to our monastery, we remind them not to follow the breathing internally or externally. So in the case of the in-breath of, the in of the out-breath, it can be upper lip at the tip of the nose, also in this space. A little bit above the touching point, it also can be. But sometimes we follow the breathing very far. It becomes an obstacle. So briefly, we can understand that we don't have, if we have this kind of attention, we just follow the breathing inside or outside. Then when we have this kind of like a focusing points, we don't have one point in it. Then sometimes we may expect the breathing, which means sometimes we may expect in-breath to be clear, out-breath to be clear like that, right? Then there will be another obstacle. So 3, longing for the in-breath that causes restlessness internally. So he also mentioned longing for the in-breath. What does it mean, longing for the in-breath? So which means sometimes we expect obvious breathing. So later we have to talk about Anapana sections according to many suttas. I think many of people have known 4 steps of Anapanasati for beginner. Bottom, the short breath, the long breath, the short breath. Then there's a whole breath body. After that, tranquilizing the breath body, right? So we have all these instructions in Buddha's teaching. But here we have to know, sometimes our breathing becomes very subtle. Sometimes only the in-breath is very subtle, out-breath is very clear. It also can be like that. So sometimes we may expect very clear in-breath or very obvious in-breath. If we expect, it's called lobha, greed. Also, we can also say craving. So if we have that kind of craving, then we cannot stabilize our mind, we cannot tranquilize our mind, then there will be restlessness. It can cause restlessness because of like expectation or longing for or desiring. So if we cannot have one pointedness, there will be restlessness. So that is why the 3 is longing for the in-breath that causes restlessness internally. That means we just wait. The in-breath is called, right? Restlessness internally. Sometimes we may wait a little bit deep inside the nose, for example. If slightly a little bit inside nose, it doesn't matter. If we follow very deep inside nose, is with the problem. Then 4, longing for the out-breath that causes restlessness externally. It will be similar to previous one. Sometimes the in-breath is very clear, the out-breath is very subtle. We may expect clear out breath, we may expect obvious breathing. Then if we expect or if we desire to have clearer or like obvious breathing, we're going to have one-pointedness. It will cause restlessness. So that is why it's also important. Don't expect clearer one. We must accept natural breathing. So many times, many of meditators ask me, how to be natural? This is a very common question. Now, whenever they ask this kind of question, I also answer a very simple way. As if you are breathing in your daily life, you have to breathe in, breathe out when you are meditating. That's really very important. Okay, now, yeah, in this case, don't expect clear one. Don't expect obvious one. Accept natural breathing. It will be easier to improve. If we cannot accept it, it becomes an obstacle. It becomes impurity of breathing meditation. Okay, now 5. Attachment to the out-breath because of suffering from very long or short in-breath. sometimes our in-breath become very short or very long. We are impatient. Sometimes when we have very long in-breath, we have to wait, right? And it finish. Very short breath also, too short, impatient, possible. That is why we have attachment to the out-breath. Then this is also called an obstacle. So we also have to know, right, whenever we have short breath or maybe long breath, we must be patient. If we are impatient, then we cannot practice very well. Okay, so okay, now next one, attachment to the in-breath because of suffering from very long or short out-breath. Okay, you can also understand similar. Okay, the main thing is that if we are impatient with the breathing, whether it's short or long, then we cannot tranquilize our minds because of impatience. Sometimes we are struggling too much. The more we struggle, the more we have restlessness, the more we have thoughts. So we have to understand the one as obstacle. So here in the first group, we have 6. We have 6 types of impurity. The following insides, following the outsides, or following the in-breath, following the out-breath, longing for in-breath or longing for out-breath, the attachment to out-breath, attachment to the in-breath. Altogether, we have 6 impurity. So these are 6 impurity of breathing concentration. So he who has restlessness due to this impurity cannot be free from hindrances. Then those who do not know the release believe in hearsay. Here we have to talk about release. The Pali word is we call vimokha, vimochati. So when we go in and check in the stanza, you also mention Chitan vimochati. Vimokha apajanando. We have that kind of statement. That's why if we say vimokha, there are 2 types of vimokha. And did I mention in the description? The first one is aramana dimoti vimokha. Freedom or release or paying attention to meditation subjects, the breathing. So sometimes our mind must be free to pay attention to the meditation subjects. If our mind is not very free, we have some obstacle, we cannot practice easily. Otherwise, the pachanika vimoti vimokha, the release of being free from the opposite fetters, which means hindrances. They also mention, I cannot be free from hindrances. So if our mind is free from hindrances, we cannot improve easily. Now, one more thing here I have to introduce. So when we talk about hindrances, we can also understand all types of defilements, all types of unwholesome mental fetters. That means when we have defilements, our improvement will become very slow. Not only that, we also can get lost. That means declination or concentration will be there. That is why we must train our minds in order that we may not have any defilements or any hindrances. Okay, now we have to go to the next 6. So there I also mentioned about the stanza, or we can also say normal explanation according to this impurity. So they are mentioned Nimitan awacha manasa asase wikibade mano. Asasa awacha manasa nimite chitan wikambati. Nimitan awacha manasa pasase wikibade mano. Asasa awacha manasa nimitan wikam chitan wikambati. Asasa awacha manasa pasase wikibade mano. Pasasa awacha manasa asase chitan wikambati. Cha edi ubakilesa anapana sri samadhisa. He wikiba manasa no chitan vimochati vimokha apajanando. Dehundi Barabatiya. These are the second groups. We said the second 6. Actually, in this part, we also have to understand one stanza. Okay, many people also ask the same things many times. For example, there are in-breath, the out-breath, and the touching points. These are not the object of single mind, something like that, right? We have that kind of statement in 𝐕𝐢𝐬𝐬𝐻. Okay, this one is also from 𝐕𝐢𝐬𝐬𝐻. So, okay, here we have 3 things: nimitta, asasa, basasa. So when we talk about nimitta, here nimitta means the breathing, the touching point. So we have to understand this one. Nimitta means the touching point. As we have already known, the touching point can be anywhere around nostril. It can be upper lip or at the tip of the nose. So the first one, restlessness. Okay, number 1, right? Restlessness in the in-breath due to concentrations of touching. Sometimes we also think about touching point too much. If we think about touching point too much, then we may have restlessness in breath. This is the one thing. Restlessness in touching due to concentration of in-breath. Sometimes we wish to know the in-breath, but we also think about too much concentration about in-breath. Although we have restlessness in the touching point. So actually these 6 are very simple. That's why I don't need to explain too much. Okay, 3, restlessness in the out-breath due to concentration of touching. 4, restlessness in touching due to concentration of out-breath. So 5, restlessness in the out-breath due to considerations of in-breath. 6, restlessness in the in-breath due to considerations of the out-breath. Okay, in this case, we have to understand a little bit easier way. We get confused with the touching point with the breath. Sometimes we get confused: is it touching point or not? In-breath or not? The out-breath or not? The many times it can happen. Sometimes they also say, I don't feel the touching point, I just know the breathing. It's also okay, not really big problem. So we just think about in-breath or out-breath too much, it becomes the obstacle. Then sometimes we just have only in-breath, no out-breath. We get confused again. Sometimes we don't know that, right? One of the in-breath or out-breath. We just know the touching. Sometimes we just know the touching. We don't know in the out-breath. It's possible. There can be many different horizons of breathing in, breathing out. So in this case, we have to accept natural breathing. For example, if we are only the in-breath, don't think about out-breath anymore. Don't think about touching point anymore. Just focus on it. Sometimes we just know the out-breath. We don't know the in-breath. Focus on the out-breath. Don't think about in-breath anymore. Sometimes we just know the touching point. Don't think about in and out. Just know the touching point. It doesn't matter. Okay, here we have to remind one more thing for beginner, especially for beginner, right? If we emphasize focusing on touching sensation too much, you may feel tense. This is only one obstacle. This is one thing we have to be very careful. So don't use too much energy also. Later, there will be another impurity. Okay, briefly, here in this part, in this 6, although here we list out 6, right? The main thing is in-breath, the out-breath, and the touching point, only 3. We will know one of the 3. Sometimes we can also know 3 of them. Sometimes we can know only 2 of them. We have to accept the situation. Otherwise, it becomes impurity. It becomes an obstacle. So at the end, it was mentioned, these are the 6 impurity of breathing concentration. He who has restlessness due to these impurities cannot be free from hindrances. Those who do not know the release belief in hearsay. So that means this is reminding, right? If we don't know these things, sure, we may believe in hearsay. Whatever people say, we have to say yes, or we have to accept it. So sometimes we cannot improve because of this impurity. We must be very careful. Okay, now the last group among the 18, the last 6. So the last 6 is a little bit easier to mention because only 2 stanzas. Atita nu dhawanan chitan anagata patikankanan lina Adipakhitan abhinadan abanadan chitan samadhiyati cha ete ubakilesa anapanan sati samadhisa yehi ubakilita sangapo adichitana pajanati. That is the stanza mentioned in Patisambhidamaka. Okay, now we should go to the list. So the first one, the mind that goes beyond the touching point. Okay, one more thing here. In Pali, we call Atita Nudhavana Chitta. Atita Nudhavana Chitta means we just follow the past breathing. Past breathing means the breath has already passed the touching point. Right? So we don't stop on the touching point, we just follow inside the breath. Follow the breathing internally or externally. We can also understand the mind that go beyond the touching point. So we call in Bali Atita Nudhavana. Okay, one more thing about Atita Nudhavana. So if we follow inside internally or externally, we cannot have peacefulness. Also, as we have mentioned before, if we follow internally, there will be internal thoughts. Restlessness internally. Then we cannot feel peacefulness. Sometimes our body will tremble or shake. Body also not very stable. So if the mind is not very stable, the body also not very stable. We have to understand this part first. Okay, now again, we have the next one, the longing for the breath that has not yet come to the touching point. So, okay, here we call in Bali anagata, right? Because of anagata patikankanan. Patikankanan means expecting the future. Anagata means future. So we may expect future breathing. Future breathing means unarisen breathing. So sometimes we have to wait, sometimes like a breathing is not very clear, we have to wait. If you have to wait, this is also another obstacle. Don't wait for any breathing. Just accept natural things. So it also causes restlessness. If we have to wait for the breathing that has not yet come to the touching point, this is also restlessness. Okay, now again, 3, the sluggish mind due to weakness of effort. So here we have this sluggishness, or we also like it, right? Very lazy mind, which means we don't make proper efforts. We don't have enough efforts. We don't have sufficient efforts to maintain our concentration. When we talk about 5 controlling faculties, you may remember the efforts and the concentration should be balanced. If we cannot balance these 2, there will be a problem. For example, when we have excessive efforts, weak concentration, it will cause many restlessness. Although we know that we have restlessness, it's out of our control. Sometimes we have very strong concentration, but we don't have sufficient efforts, and we may fall asleep, or we may be lazy. Sometimes our mind will be blurred. We don't know any particular objects. Although we know some object is not very clear. We don't know what kind of thing it is. That means our effort is not strong enough to maintain. Okay, the main thing is that if we don't have enough mental energy or bodily energy, there is sluggishness of the mind. It becomes impurity of concentration, impurity of breathing. So now 4, that the active mind due to strong efforts. Okay, I have already said, when we have very strong effort or excessive efforts, it also causes restlessness. That is why an active mind also, one of the problem for practitioners. So that's why we have to balance our efforts. Okay, now next one. The powerful inclinations. Okay, one more thing here. When we talk about the powerful inclinations, inclining minds, so here we just talk about the abhinata, right? We call abhinata. So the main thing is abhinata means the clinging to desirable objects. So we have many desirable objects in our practice. It also can be, right, the past desirable objects. In the past, we may have fun with our friends, talking with somebody happily, or playing with somebody, or maybe playing with something. We may have many types of happiness in the past. So when our mind inclined to this kind of things, this is also called powerful inclining minds. In Bali, we call abhinata. That it also can be an obstacle. Okay, one more thing here. Sometimes we have some difficulty in meditation. This is practically. For example, okay, this morning we meditate. We have very good experience. In the afternoon, we meditate again. We may expect or we may remember the morning section. In the morning section, we have very good experience. We bring the same things to in the afternoon. We may expect the experience we have the pleasant feeling we have experienced in the morning. Then it becomes an obstacle. So which means, although we have very good experience in the past, don't bring to the next section. If we bring good experience of previous sections or yesterday or previous day, if we expect and meditate in the new section, it becomes an obstacle because our mind is in a hurry, exciting. That's why not really very good for practice. Not only that, it also can be many long time in the past. Sometimes our mind become very calm. That many experience in the past also can appear, right? Don't follow any awkward experience in the past. Although it's essential pleasure or the Dhamma pleasure, whatever pleasant feeling, don't bring to meditation section. It will be easier to improve. There is some exception. Sometimes we have to already talk about the enlightenment factors, right? From time to time, we have to develop the enlightenment factors. So it will be exception for the practitioners. Okay, now we have to go 6. We inclining mind. So we call in Bali apakata. Apakata means, right, the minds that have been removed from undesirable objects. So one more thing, we were removed our mind from undesirable objects. So sometimes when we are meditating, we have also experienced many undesirable things in the past. We have done in the past. So our mind should be free from this kind of things. So for example, in the past, we may have some quarreling in the past. It comes to meditation section. Then we feel sorrow, worry, grief, hatred, anger. It is not very useful, right? Not very useful for improvement. It just disturbs the mind. So we can also say another way. Yeah, apagata means our mind should be free from the undesirable objects. We can also understand it is our mind should be free from ill will or hatred. So in the past, there will be many different types of hatreds or anger or ill will. Don't bring all these things to meditation. Sometimes we have habitual hatred. Right? Habitually, we have hatred. Then this is also not really very good. Some of them are really short temper, very easy to get angry. When we have this kind of habit, it's not very good for meditation. It's not very helpful for meditation. We may have very slow improvement. Then in the commentary to that, it also mentioned the 9 grounds of hatred of the past. Okay, I have to explain the 9 grounds of hatred, right? So we have 3 things about ourselves. For example, he has done something harmful to me. This is about the past, right? This is the first types of ground for hatred. So somebody have done something harmful to us. We remember, we still hate the person. Then it becomes an obstacle. That he's doing something harmful to me in the present. So this also, for example, when meditating, somebody will walk, right? Their stepping sounds are really very noisy, like boom, 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 like this. Then we have good concentration because of his stepping sounds. We can lose everything. We got angry, for example, right? This is present. Somebody disturbs us in the present. This also gives me a ground for hatred. Another one, we also know somebody will disturb us in the future. It also gives me ground for hatred. So related to ourselves, there are 3 grounds of hatred. He has done something harmful to us in the past. He is doing something harmful to us. He will do something harmful to us. So 3 grounds for hatred related to ourselves. Similarly, our beloved one. He has done something harmful to our beloved ones. He is doing something harmful to our beloved one. He will do something harmful for our beloved one. So when we have this kind of mind, this is also called ground of hatred. It becomes an obstacle. Another one is our enemies. He has been working for our enemies, or he has worked for our enemies very well. I mean, he has done something beneficial for our enemies, right? Similarly, he is doing or helping our enemies. Then he will help our enemies. Altogether 9. We call 9 grounds of hatred. So here, weak inclined mind means our mind will incline to that kind of undesirable things. Actually, we don't have all these things are undesirable. That's why our mind will incline to it. It makes our concentration weaker. So these are the impurity we can find in Purification. Also at the end, it also mentioned these are the 6 impurity of breathing concentration. One who has wrong thoughts defined by this impurity cannot know the superior mind. Okay, here one more thing, superior mind. We have already said, right? So if we have this impurity, then we cannot improve easily. Also, we may have a wrong thoughts because of defined by this impurity. If we have wrong thoughts, then we cannot improve easily. Okay, now again, also mention Aditita there. He cannot know superior mind. We call embodied Aditita. Aditita means this is about the jhana. So you have already know what is really called jhana, right? So if we sometimes our mind is not very stable, then our body also not very stable. Then we cannot attain any jhana, any absorption states if we are all this impurity. So these are the first part of anapanasati. We have to know these are impurity of breathing. Then we have to continue the 13 purity of breathing meditation. I think you have many of them you have already learned before. Anyway, yeah, we have to introduce all the Pali words again. They are mentioned Adithanudhavanantitam, Vekipanubhatitam, Tam Vivajayadawa Ekathane Samadhati. The mind that follows the past is oppressed by restlessness. By giving up it, he can concentrate on one point. Actually, this also, we have already talked about Adithanudhavanantitam, right? Following the past, go beyond the touching point also mentioned there. So the main thing is, sometimes if we have this kind of mind, then our mind is oppressed by restlessness. We have to give up. If we cannot give up following like this, here we say we follow the past objects. Past object means we just follow the breath beyond the touching points. For example, when we focus in breath, we just go beyond the touching points inside the body. When we focus our breath, we just follow the our breath outside the body very far. Then, if we have this kind of things, there's a restlessness. That is why it will be an obstacle. So if we can give up, we can concentrate in one point. Here, ekathane. Ekathane means one point. Now, samadhi means concentrate. We can concentrate in one point. If we cannot give up, we cannot concentrate on it. So 2. Anagata patikankanantitam. We can be done. Then we will jayadawa. That heva atimotiti. So again here, the mind that expects the future is shaken. And we can be done means shaken. So that means if we expect the breathing, non-breathing not come to the touching point yet. Right? We expect that our mind is shaken, not very stable. If we cannot give up, we cannot improve. So we have to give up. Then we can keep our mind on the touching points. That's also called purity. Okay, now we have to move to the next one. 3. The 3, linantitam, kosachanupatitam, tam pati paganhedawa, kosacham bajahati. So the sluggish mind is oppressed by laziness. By supporting the mind, he abandoned the laziness. Here we have to explain a little bit more today about the one. So as we have learned many things about enlightenment factors, here we have sluggish minds. The mind is not very active or lazy. We can also like hesitations, unwilling, we can also say like that. Linami, negative minds, right? Let me unwilling or hesitation or laziness or sluggish. So if we have laziness or unwillingness to meditate, we have to, I just mentioned here, by supporting the minds, he abandoned laziness. What does it mean supporting? In Pali here mentioned, Bhaganitawa. It mentioned Bhaganitawa. Bhaganitawa means by developing enlightenment factors or investigation and rapture. We can also say the enlightenment factor investigations, efforts, and rapture. We have already talked about all the enlightenment factors a very long time ago when we talk about the jhana or we talk about 10 ski or absorptions. So we have to develop these enlightenment factors to support our minds. Mostly when somebody came and reported me about laziness, I just recommend and to do, right? For example, rapture means we can do like Buddhanosati, Dhammanosati, Sanghanosati, and so forth. For non-Buddhists, mostly I recommend to do Jaganosati. Mostly they have offered many different things to many different organizations or many different people. I just recommend them to do recollection of charity, generosity. Anyway, by developing the enlightenment factors of investigations or effort or energy or rapture, we can support our minds to be eager or to have a willingness to continue practicing. This is called 3, right? We call Bhaganitawa. Okay, 4. Ati Bhagahitan Chitan Odajanu Pati down. Vinigahitawa Odajan Bhajahati. Exerting the mind is oppressed by restlessness. Exerting mind is oppressed by restlessness. Restraining the mind, he abandons the restlessness. So we already talked about the impurity before. When we have excessive efforts, there will be restlessness. It's common. It's normal for everybody. So when we have very strong effort or excessive efforts, then we have to think about the enlightenment factors. Right? It will cause restlessness. That's when to overcome restlessness, we have to develop the enlightenment factors. Here I mentioned restraining the mind. In Bali, here I mentioned Vinigahitawa. Vinigahitawa means by developing the enlightenment factors of tranquility, concentrations, and equanimity. So you have already know, right? We have already explained all these things in the past. But briefly here, 2 or 3 and 4. If we have very weak energy or sluggish minds or laziness, we have to develop 3 enlightenment factors. Then when we have very strong efforts or too much active, then we have to develop 3 enlightenment factors. So what about mindfulness? There are 6 enlightenment factors. Here it doesn't mention mindfulness. So mindfulness can be in both groups. For example, when we talk about sluggish minds, then we can also say we can develop the enlightenment factor of mindfulness, investigations, energy, and rapture. Sometimes our mind is right? We have a lot of excessive efforts. Then we have restlessness. At the time, we can develop the alignment factor of mindfulness, tranquility, concentrations, and equanimity. We can also understand like that. Okay, now 5. Abhinadanchidam, raganupatidam, dan sambhajano, hudawa, ragan, vajahati. The mind that bends on pleasure is oppressed by lust. By understanding it, he abandons the lust. So here it mentioned Abhinadanchidam. We have already mentioned the one in the impurity. Like inclining concentration, inclining minds. So that means the mind that bent on pleasure. We already talked about that before. So here the solution is Dan Sambhajano Hutawa, by understanding it. What is understanding? Here Sambhajano Hutawa means by practicing aspa meditation, we can abandon the lust. Even previous talk, our previous topic, right? 32 body parts. There we have already talked about reversiveness meditation. So we can also practice 32 body parts to overcome lustful minds. We can also practice asapa meditation. We have already talked about 10 types of corpse according to 𝐕𝐢𝐬𝐬𝐚. Then we can also learn similar thing in Mahasatipatthana Sutta, 9th channel ground chapter. Anyway, here when we have Raganupatita means follow, right? Follow to the pleasure that is oppressed by lust. So if we have a lustful minds, it becomes impurity. We already talked about it before, among impurity. But here it has mentioned the solution. When we have that kind of things, we can go to Asubha, until we can abandon it. After that, we can come back to Anapanasati. Okay, now 6. Apanadanchidam bhayaparanupatidam tan sambhajano hudawa bhayaparam bhajana vajahati. The mind that puts the pleasure aside is oppressed by ill will. By understanding it, he abandons ill will. So these are the first 6. Right? Okay, now here also we talk about ill will. In Bali we call Vyapada. Although we just use the English term ill will, of the Bali term Bali terms Vyapada, it also refers to all kinds of unpleasant minds, such as hatred, anger, worry, lamentation, sorrow, grief, displeasure, mental pain. There are many, many synonyms of dosa. These are similar to undesirable objects. We have already talked about impurity before. Okay, now again, when we come to know these, right, it will, what to do? Here mentioned, by understanding it. What does it mean by understanding it? In Bali, we call it Sambhajano Hudawa. So that means we can practice loving kindness meditation. By practicing metta meditation, we can overcome ill will. Although here I say only loving kindness, actually we can also practice 4 sublime abiding to overcome hatred. There are many other ways to overcome hatred. But anyway, now here we don't need to say many different things about hatred. The main thing is, if we have ill will, we can practice full sublime abidance. Later we will explain how to meditate, how to practice loving kindness, compassion, sympathetic joy, equanimity. We have to practice all these things in order that we may be able to overcome ill will, hatred, worry, sorrow, lamentation, and so forth. So these are the 6 conditions. The mind is, what these 6 conditions, the mind is pure, brilliant, and has unifications with breathing on the touching point. Okay, now one more thing to talk about Parisuddhi. Here we mentioned, right? The mind is pure. When we say the mind is pure, that means there's no impurity. We already mentioned impurity, right? That's why when we have these 6 conditions, no more impurity. The brilliant, the mind will become bright. This is also metaphorically saying, right? The mind is invisible. I mean, mind produces materiality, will produce the light, brighter color. Then there will be the unification with the breathing and on the touching point. The mind will know the breathing on the touching point, or right? He can focus on the breath clearly. Okay, now we have to say another one. So 7, Dana Osaka Batane Nekatan. So the one-pointedness of the manifestation of offering and giving up. Actually, this is just direct translation from the Pali, but in reality, it means we can practice the recollection of generosity. Then, as we have already learned, if we can practice the recollection of generosity, what will be the concentration? We have already known, right? It will be as a concentration. For example, when we talk about Jaganosati, we have already mentioned many steps to achieve as a concentration. If we summarize, whenever we can remember our offering, our donations, our generous minds, we can feel peace and happiness. We can say pamaja. After that, it will produce rapture, piti. When piti becomes very powerful, rapture becomes very powerful, it will produce passaddhi, tranquility. When tranquility becomes very powerful, then it will produce sukha, happiness or the bliss. When the sukha becomes very powerful, it will produce concentration. In the case of generosity, then it can produce asset concentration. So we can understand from time to time, we need rapture or joy. At the time, we have to practice, we have to do this 7 solution, right? Manifestation, offering, or giving up. Okay, now one more thing here. We also have already said developing enlightenment factors. This is also one of the development of enlightenment factors. Okay, now 8. Samatha Nimitu Bhatta Nekata, the one-pointedness of manifestation of the sign of concentration. So here it mentioned many different things about practice. So one-pointedness of the manifestation of sign of concentration, we call Samatha Nimitta. So when we can attain absorption concentrations, then we may have Patibhaga nimitta. This is called sign of concentration. So this is just for samatha practitioners. When we are practicing samatha, we can also practice any of meditation subjects. Now we have already talked about regulation of generosity, right? We also have already talked about asava meditation. We also have already talked about metta meditation. But now there are many other remaining meditation. Then we may have sign of concentration, we call nimitta. So sometimes our mind can focus on nimitta. We can say one-pointedness. If we can absorb on it, we call absorption concentration. We can say jhana concentration. Actually, this number 8 is just for samatha practitioners. Now here, we are talking about anapanasati, right? We can say this for anapana practitioners or any other samatha practitioners. Now 9. Then here mentioned Vaya Lakanubate Lakanata Nekatan. Vaya Lakanuba. Vaya Lakana. So one-pointedness of the manifestation of decay nature, or the characteristics of decay, just for Vipassana practitioners. So then we also have to know what kind of Vipassana it should be. Right? We should know what kind of Vipassana it should be, right? Then when we are going to talk about this kind of insight knowledge, it can be very high insight knowledge. Vaya Lakana. Right? Vaya Lakana means we can say like a Banganyana. So this is very high insight knowledge already. So, okay, briefly, here in this case, we have to talk about very basic Vipassana. For example, we have to discern ultimate reality, especially Nama and Rupa in the very beginning. There can be many different types of mental process, many different types of the components we have to break down. After that, we also have to know cause and effect relationship. Then we have to contemplate that as anicca, dukkha, anatta. Gradually, if we can improve well, finally we may talk about Vaya Lakana. We call Udaya Vaya Jnana or Banga Jnana. When we talk about Vaya, it also similar to Banga Jnana. Okay, anyway, it must be insight for Vipassana practitioners. Okay, now 10. Nirodhupathane, Nirodhupathane Katan. The one-pointedness of manifestation of cessation. This is for noble persons. Okay, here Nirodhupathane Katan. It can be any of fruition attainment. There are many of noble persons, they can enter into fruition attainment. They can spend whole time, whole day, whole night like that. It's just for Vipassana practitioners, noble persons. So these are the first part of purity. Then it also mentioned, right? With these 4 conditions, the mind that has single object reaches purity of practice. It is also developing the equanimity, the equanimity and gladdening the mind with wisdom. One more thing here, equanimity and gladdening the mind. So for our equanimity, it depends on the practice. For example, in the case of skill and absorption, we may have equanimous efforts. Sometimes the mind and the object become harmonious. We don't need to struggle anymore. We don't watch it. we just try to know it normally, we can get deeper concentration naturally. This is also called equanimous efforts, equanimity. For about the gradient in the mind, there are many different ways of gradient in the mind, such as developing the enlightenment factor of rapture is possible to gradient our mind. So, for example, like by doing Buddhanosati, Dhammanosati, Sanghanosati, Jaganosati, and so forth. Okay, these are, we can say, 10 purity, right? Not only that, we have in the very beginning, I will talk about 13 purity. So 3 more. Okay, we can go to 3, right? This will be the last part of today's Dhamma talk. So they are mentioned Patamasa Jhanasa for the first jhana. Patibhada Visuddhi Adi. Purifications of the practice is the beginning. Then 2, Ubhaka Nubhihuna Maje. The intensifications of equanimity is the middle. 3, Samahasana Priyosana. The satisfactions is the end. So also here of mind, please review the qualities of jhana. So here I didn't write down anything. So we can review the quality of jhana again. So as we have already mentioned, the first one, Patibhada Visuddhi Adi. What does it mean? The purifications of the practice is the beginning. What is any purification? So the mind is purified of the obstructions of obstruction to jhana. So there are many obstructions to jhana, right? We have, for example, hindrances. This is also called obstructions. So if there's obstructions to jhana, then we cannot attain any man. We cannot attain any jhana. That's why the first one, Patibhada Visuddhi means the mind is purified of the obstructions to jhana. Now, I said, the mind is also equanimous to the sign of concentration. But sometimes we have equanimous efforts or equanimous awareness to the sign of concentration, which means without laziness or restlessness. If we have laziness and restlessness, we don't have equanimity. We don't have equanimous mind towards the sign of concentration. This is also called Patibhada Visuddhi. Then the mind enters into the sign of concentration. We can say absorbed in the nimitta. This is also called Patibhada Visuddhi. And number 1, purifications of the practice. So when we attain jhana, these are the mark or the characteristics of jhana. 2, it mentioned Ubhaka Nubhihana Maje. Intensifications of equanimity is the middle. What does it mean? Intensifications of equanimity. So there are also 3. He looks on with equanimity at the purity of mind. So which means, although our mind is pure, we have equanimity toward it. Okay, this is the problem. Sometimes when our mind becomes very calm and quiet, we are not very familiar with this kind of situation. When the mind becomes very calm and very quiet, we are excited. This is not really a very good sign of improvement. Anyway, here he looks on with equanimity at the purity of the mind. This is also called Ubhaka Nubhihana Maje. Then he looks on with equanimity at the way, because of the practice, the samatha practice. So here we can also say like a medium mind on the right object. the mind will take the right object. In the case of jhana, we can say Pratibhaga nimitta, the right object, not change into another object, right? So this is also called the practice of samatha. Even he also have equanimity towards the practice. Then another one. He looks on with equanimity at the appearance of one-pointedness. Sometimes our mind becomes very sharp, very strong. We have one-pointedness. Sometimes when we have one-pointedness, we are not used to be with this kind of situation. We may feel excitement. That's not really very good for improvement. Okay, briefly, two, it mentioned Ubhakanubuhana Matre. You can divide into three. Okay, one of the three. One is he looks on with equanimity at the purity of mind. Two, he looks on with equanimity at the way of the practice of serenity. We can samatha practice, having media mind on the right object. Three, he looks on with equanimity at the appearance of one-pointedness. These are called put in the middle. Here in the list mentioned, Ubhaka Nubuhana Mate. Now the last part, here we have the four characteristics and the end. It mentions Sambhahasana Priyosana. What does it mean, Sambhahasana Priyosana? The satisfactions in the sense that there are non-excessive dhammas that arise together. We have already talked about it many times. For example, we may have 5 controlling faculties. If one of them becomes very excessive, the remaining factors cannot work properly. Okay, for example, when we are practicing jhana, we may have very strong faith, very strong confidence. When it becomes very strong, all other factors should be strong also. If one of them becomes very strong, all other become very weak, then we cannot say it is a good condition. We must balance all the controlling faculties. So here, in the case of Sambhahasana, there is satisfactions in the sense that there are non-excessive dhammas that arise together at the moment of jhana. And next one. The satisfactions in the sense that the controlling faculties have single function. What do you mean single function? I have already explained that one. They have only one function, that is to be free from defilements, to release from defilements. They function together. They are working together. Okay, they also have already given some simile at that time. For example, for the first one, right? Sorry, Sambhahasana, previous one, non-excessive dhamma. For example, in the case of the first jhana, Vitaka, Vichara, Piti, Sukha, Ekaggata, 5 jhana factors, they will work together. They will arise together. They are in balance. Now here, in the case of single function, all the controlling faculties will function together to eradicate or to overcome the hindrances, the opposition factors of jhana. Then the satisfactions in the sense that the appropriate energy was effective for controlling faculties. So that means we can balance our efforts very well. Then there will be, if we can balance our efforts, we can also balance all other controlling faculties well, then there will be satisfaction. Now, okay, for the satisfactions in the sense of repetition, all these dhamma will arise repeatedly many times. If all of these arise repeatedly, Then this is called Sambhahasana. There can be satisfactions. This is called 3, right? Sambhahasana, Priyosana. The satisfaction is the end. So today we have already talked about the purifications of the impurity and impurity of Anapanasati according to Parisambhidhammaga. So this is the first part of Anapanasati. We have to continue a little bit long process. I don't know how many days it will take. So anyway, when we are going to practice mindfulness of breathing, we also have to know what makes us improve, what makes us weak and decline. If we can know all this impurity and impurity, we can also say all these obstacles and guidelines to improve. It will be more beneficial for our practice. Mostly, I don't explain all this impurity because many of meditators get confused after listening. A long time I didn't talk about impurity. This is actually second time I just talk about impurity to meditators. Anyway, if we can follow the Buddha teaching in the right paths, we can also practice. Then also we can also improve. We can also attain path and future knowledge or jhana. So may you all be able to practice the Buddha teaching, the 3 trainings, morality, concentration, and wisdom. May you all be able to attain the final cessations and of suffering, nibbana. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu.
Vanami said also, somebody said that the Arahant will not do any kusala, any akusala. So anything he do, just kiriya. So it means whatever he do, have no kusala, so he cannot share that merit with his passed away relative. Is that true? Like the Peta, or because he had no kusala, so he cannot share the merit to his passed away relative. Is that
we cannot
true?
say like that. Okay, we cannot say like that, right? So, okay, we cannot say, okay, after he may observe precepts, he may do dana, right? All these are not karma, we can say it like that, right? They are not karma. It cannot produce any effect in the future. That's what we call kiriya chitta. It doesn't mean he cannot share the merits with his departed relatives, right? This is a misunderstanding, okay?
There are 4 parts of the question. So what is the reasons at the practice of Anapanasati? One have to mention about touching point. Isn't the Anapanasati's object is the in and out breath? What is the reason to mention this touching point as a nimitta?
Okay.
Is it that the purpose is to purpose is to know the area of the breath?
Okay, so
this is a question.
Okay, so now we have to introduce very beginning part of samatha section, right? Purification of mind. There we have already explained there are 3 types of meditations: Dita, seeing; Sutta, learning; Putta, touching. In the case of breathing, we can learn from touching. That's why you mentioned touching points, right? In the case of kasina, seeing, well, it mentioned the color, the shape like that. In the case of 32 body parts, learning, we have to recite verbally, mentally, something like that, right? Learning. So we have 3 types of meditation. That's why here is mentioned the in-breath, the out-breath, or the touching points. As long as the meditator can know one of the 3, this is the Anapanasati. If he cannot know one of the 3, he cannot improve meditation. This is the teaching, right? Okay. B. What's B?
B is if he can only focus onto the touching point, but not focusing onto the breath on the touching point. Is that wrong?
Okay.
Does that mean a 4-element practice?
Okay, so one more thing here. If we just know the touching points, this is also okay. One more thing. If you emphasize focus on touching too much, you may feel sensation more, like stiffness or tension, something like that. We don't recommend to emphasize on touching point too much, right? Okay, 4 elements, it doesn't mean 4 elements. If you think about sensation too much, it can change to 4 elements. If you just know the breathing or just touching around the nose, it doesn't matter. Sometimes you can know in our breath, sometimes you can know the touching, it doesn't matter, right? Okay, briefly, if I summarize my answer, don't emphasize focus on touching point too much. You must know breathing and then touching. One of the two. It will be easier for you, more convenient for you. Okay? C?
C, 如果没有 if he doesn't focus onto the breath on the touching or on the breath that pass through the touching point, he just focus onto the breath on at the space. Is it okay?
Okay, so in the case, if you follow very far from your nursery, not very good sign, how I say, right? Past objects to do far from the touching points. Slightly above the touching point, it doesn't matter. It will be okay, right? The next one, T.
D. Why one must only focus on to the breath on the touching point? Is that 经过触点的不会去这个 Is it because the breath that pass through the touching point is more easy to be focused? The breath on the space at the space is not easy to focus.
Okay, so in this case, yeah, we have to know the one-pointedness, right? We must have one-pointedness. Space is endless, right? Sometimes we're gonna find where is it breathing. If we say space, so that is why we don't bother. I mean, we're gonna find any source about focus on the space, right? So each other mention focus on the space. We can say impurity. Okay, if we summarize for all the question you ask, right? You have to know touching points is one of the objects. The impress is one of the objects. The object is one of the objects. In the books also mentioned where's the touching points. It's mentioned around the nursery or upper lip. That's why as long as you can know on the touching points, or as long as you can know the breathing. Okay, I always say sometimes you cannot know the breathing, so you cannot know the touching. You can know the breathing. It's also okay. That's why as long as you can know breathing in, breathing out, or touching, is right. If you're trying to know many other things more than that, then it can be impurity. Okay?
First question, can Xiaodo please explain one more time by taking Anapanasati as an example, how to develop 7 Bojjhanga, means how to use 7 Bojjhanga in the practice of Anapanasati. Second, the 7 Sambojjhanga, if it is not enough, how to fulfill it, and the 7 Sambojjhanga, how to balance if it is not balanced.
Okay. So they are actually in the even today I have already talked about sometimes very sluggish, very lazy. At the time we can develop the enlightenment factor of energy, the enlightenment factor of investigation, the enlightenment factor of rapture. 3. If we add one more, the enlightenment factor of mindfulness, it can be 4, right? So mindfulness always needed. So it depends on the situation we have. We may have different enlightenment factors. For example, in the case of Vidhi Sambojjhanga, we have already explained Buddhanosati, Dhammanosati, Sanghanosati. By doing all these things, we can have gladden minds, we can gladden our minds, we can also overcome the sluggish or laziness, right? This is the one thing. For about excessive efforts or sometimes too much energetic. Here we call Atipakita, right? Exciting too much energy or too much eager. Then we have this kind of situation. Sometimes it also can be an obstacle. So when we have this kind of obstacle, we can also practice the enlightenment factor of tranquility, concentrations, and equanimity. If we add one more thing, mindfulness. So these are the way to overcome or to overcome too much effort or excessive efforts or too much eagerness. So, okay, if we, according to the situation, we have to develop different types of enlightenment factors. What about balances? Sometimes, for example, you have very strong concentration. How I say, concentration and effort should be balanced. If we cannot balance very well, then there will be a disturbance. Similarly, when we talk about controlling faculties, saddha and panya, confidence and wisdom, we have to balance. If we cannot balance well, there will be the problem. There will be some side effect, okay, side effect of the practice. That is why it depends on the situation we have. We have different types of trainings to overcome the problem, whether balancing controlling faculties or whether developing enlightenment factors. Okay, next one.
Just now mentioned about this Patipada Visuddhi Adi.
Okay.
Patipada. By by focusing on single object, how can it arrive this Patipada Visuddhi? And second, Patipada Visuddhi, does that include samatha and vipassana? For example, in the 道之果之审查之前的13个 for the 13th jnana before the magga and phala jnana, are they considered Patipada Visuddhi?
Okay, so here we just talk about anapanasati. That's why we should not get confused with the vipassana or any other part. So if we can know only one object, we can say purification of the mind. This is called Patipada Visuddhi, right? We are going the right path, the pure path, like this. Okay?
我能理解到 in the purifications of anapanasati, number 9.
Okay.
Number 9 is Vayalakkanupattanekatang. What is the meaning?
Okay.
Does that mean does that mean by anapana practice, then one can purify his mind and then the mind's quality is developed, then he has very strong and powerful mindfulness and ekaggata. Then this equanimity will be enhanced with this high quality of mind and powerful concentration. Then the practice of this Vayalakkana will be easy. And because of that, it arises ekaggata. Is that correct, this understanding?
Actually, in the case of Vayalakkana, it is, we have to talk about Vipassana practitioner. So, okay, I should check in the books, huh? What's it?
I think the question, because it is about anapanasati practice, the purification of anapanasati.
Sure.
It talks about Vayalakkana.
Sure.
Yeah.
Actually, when we talk about Vayalakkana, it is how we talk about this is about, right? The Vipassana practitioners, right? They also have already mentioned Vipassana. So, what about Vayalakkana? Okay, if we talk about Vayalakkana, this is it. In the case of Vipassana, we have like a Udaya Vaya Jnana, right? Udaya, Baya, Jnana. There's Udaya and Vaya, two different practices. So when we say Udaya Vaya, yeah, when we talk about Vaya, okay, what should I say here? Okay. When we talk about okay, in the commentary it mentioned Banga Nubasana do Pataya. One more thing. It comes from Banga Jnana to higher insight knowledges. It mentioned like that. Okay. So that means we must practice only perishing state of ultimate reality based on Anapana Jhana or so forth. Okay. This one.
Question number 6. Vandami Sayadaw, when taking a bath in cold weather, if a monk pours hot water into normal water to become warmer water to take a bath, is this the offense? Is the same as pour hot water into the ground, harming the insect? Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu.
Oh, like this. If on the ground or on the insect is in how many insects are not really this is not allowable, right? If you know there's an insect, we must not pour hot water. If there's no insect, we can do it. We cannot say offense, right? Not only that, if we know there's an insect inside the water, so we must not throw away. Then if we know there's an insect in the water, we must not put any grass into it. If we put this is also offense. The main thing is if we know there's an insect, we must not pour any water, hot water or cold water, if we know they were dying. Okay?
And the first question is when a meditator practices anapanasati, he can bear with the normal natural sound without being angry. For example, the sound of the wind, bird chirping, and so on. But it will be disturbed by sound made by people, for example, walking down. Or why is that so? And how to overcome this, and how to be how to overcome it, and how to overcome these disturbances.
Okay.
And for example, for example, the Buddha sit under the tree. He will be away from those disturbances.
Sure. Okay. So now, for that kind of people, for those who disturbs meditators, we have to understand one more thing about Dhammandaraya, the obstructions of Dhamma, right? We call it Dhammandaraya in Pali. Dhammandaraya means if we disturb other people's meditations or other people's good actions, then this is also called an obstructions. So we can understand Punyandaraya, and also we can also say Dhammandaraya. Punyandaraya means if we disturb other people's wholesome deeds, wholesome actions, then this is a Punyandaraya. In the case of Punyandaraya, it will be very wide because sometimes with the good intention, we just have, but it becomes disturbance, right? This will be exception. Because we have good intention, but because of some bad situation, it gets worse. We're going to say that's the disturbance. We're going to say all the obstructions. Another one is Dhammandaraya. If we knowingly disturb other people, or if we unknowingly disturb other people, then it can be considered as Dhammandaraya, obstructions of Dhamma. So Punyandaraya, the obstructions of charity or generosity or any wholesome deeds can hinder his life in the good destination. This is one thing. But if we have Dhammandaraya, if we have accumulated many Dhammandaraya, it will become an obstacle for his future practice. Next life, when he meditated, there will be many, many obstacles, many, many difficulties. That's why when you have in your environment, when you have this kind of Dhamma friends, just more radiating compassion toward them. They are really very beautiful living beings, right? They will encounter many difficulties in the future. when you have this kind of intention, and then you can release from hatred or anger. Okay, next one.
Question 8. Vietnamese Sayadaw, can we control our breathing a little bit until our concentration improves if we cannot easily feel the breath? Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu.
So if we control the breathing a little bit, also not very convenient, it's not very comfortable. Especially when it becomes habits, it will get worse. That's why, if you cannot know breathing anymore, you should practice other subjects. For example, there's some problem in their nose. They cannot know the breathing, then they can change like 4 elements, Kasina, Buranosti, or many other subjects. So we don't recommend to control or to forcefully breathe in, breathe out. Okay?
What is the difference between Vikipati and Uttacha?
Okay, we can say they are synonym. Okay, they are synonym. We can say like that, right? Okay.
For Anagami Brahma beings, when they stay in the Suddhavasa, then after they attain the Arahantship, would they enter into Nibbana on the same day, at the same day?
No, they can live. They can live. They don't need to enter Nibbana at the same day. Okay.
Every phenomena would there be Paramata and Panyati two sides. Can we say that the Panyati is formed by Nama Rupa? And then this forming itself, this Samoha itself, is Panyati. After analyzing it, it becomes Nama Rupa. Can we understand in this way?
Okay, we cannot say like that. Okay. Okay. One more thing. Okay. Name is also Panyati. For example, we talk about 𝐕𝐢𝐬𝐻. 𝐕𝐢𝐬𝐻 is the name, right? If we don't know the truth of if our vision is not very clear, then we can say 𝐕𝐢𝐻. So 𝐕𝐢𝐻 is the name of the ultimate reality, right? We can say Nama Panyati. We cannot say form, just name. So if we in your question, we can understand, okay, a little bit different from your questions. Name concepts and thing concepts, two different things. So we have ultimate reality. We also give the name. Paramita, Tirasika, Phassa, Vedana, right? We have like a context, feeling, perception. We just name like this. All these are name concepts. Things concepts. They are not things. We cannot touch anything. No material. We cannot say form or shape or anything. There are no things. They are only name concepts. For about the ultimate materialities, for example, color, smell, taste, tangible objects, right? So in the case of color, we can see it. In the case of smell or sounds, in the sound we can hear, smell, we can smell it, touch, also we can feel. So they are material, right? They have names, they also have things. But name concept or thing concepts both, right? But when we are going to talk about ultimate reality, we must know the nature or the characteristics of ultimate reality, not only the name of the things. For example, hardness of this one. When we touch, we can know hardness, but we cannot take apart hardness from this border. So this is things. This is also the name. Hardness is also the name of, right? Okay, the main thing is, when we are going to talk about ultimate reality, we must know the nature or the characteristics of ultimate reality, not only the name of the things. Okay, next one.
This Pachaya Sati is Pachaya Sati is the intrinsic power of Nama Rupa. For example, Lobha 有因缘的原理。Loba has the Pachaya of Hetu Pachaya. If give an example, if I don't have Loba and I have Adosa or Moha, Aloba, Adosa or Moha, then when he see Nama Rupa 产生的看的 then this seeing relationships appear, but it doesn't have Pachaya Sati of Hetu Pachaya. Then because of that, there won't be this vipaka. But if he eat this nama rupa, then this nama rupa they produce ahara pachaya sati. If he doesn't eat, then can we say this food, for example, has this ahara pachaya sati?
Okay.
May I say, maybe I try to simplify it. For example, if this Pachaya Sati, is it a sabhava that exists by itself, or it must happen only we have relationship? For example, this food by itself already have this ahara Pachaya Sati, or must we eat then only it produces Pachaya Sati of ahara?
Okay, in the case of ahara sati, it will be different. Hetu, in the case of hetu, this is the nama, right? In the case of ahara, then we may have two different parts. For example, nama ahara, rupa ahara, two different, right? When we talk about rupa ahara, whether we eat or we don't eat, there's a nutriment there. There's ahara sati, right? In the case of, for example, like rice, whether we eat or not, there's a nutriment there. They also produce nutriment produce kalapas. Sorry? No, not temperature produce kalapas, right? Not ahara sati. Okay, one more thing. In the case of the like eating, right? There are two supporting causes. One is a digestive heat, another one is a nutriment produce nutrient kalapas. Oja, right? The nutrients from nutriment produce kalapas. When we have these two supporting causes, newly eaten food can produce new generations like that. Okay. The main thing is in the case of ahara, when we eat, there will be ahara sati. But actually, ahara itself will be there, whether we eat or not. Okay. So it depends. Okay. Then is one.
The fifth. The 24 Pachaya, can it be used to explain the mundane phenomena? For example, when we are listening to Seattle's talk, then 渴望无痴, then he has this, then when we listen to Seattle's talks, 渴望无痴是因缘, the wish to have amoha, this is Hetu Pachaya. And the computer is Upanisaya Pachaya, and the teacher and students are Adipati Pachaya. Time is Vigata Pachaya. Dhamma is Ahara Pachaya. Sound is Aramana Pachaya. Can we say in such a way?
Sure, we can do. Yeah, we can say like that. Sure.
Wanami Bante, I have some questions as below. The first one. If a layman regularly keeps 8 precepts on Saturday, is it mandatory for him to chant the 8 precepts formally in front of the Buddha's statues, or he can only determine in the morning that he will keep the precepts that day?
Actually, if you determine, it is good enough. But if you can do formal, right? Formally, like going to the Buddha's statues, taking precepts from the Buddha. In this case, you have somebody to respect. Okay, so that means if you can take precepts from respectable people, then it will be more meaningful for your practice. So when you are going to break the rules, you may remember, oh, I have taken the precept from respectable people, like that. Okay, We can also say it's a compulsory, but is it better? Okay.
Yes.
2. What is the 2?
Number 2, is it true that the Anapanasati is only taught in the Buddha Sasana, not in any other religions? Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu.
Okay, so we can say the way we train in Buddha teaching is only we can find only in Buddha here in Buddha teaching. And there are many other ways of anapanasati in many different other sectors or many other religions. But the way we practice it, to attain jhana or to attain nibbana like that, right? We can find that kind of instruction in Buddha teaching, sure. And this one?
问答咪下头，请老师讲讲啊。Nesiado, please explain the differences between the Abhaya Nikaya and the Mahavihara Nikaya. What are the main differences and how these two Nikaya, these two sects appear in Sri Lanka? What are their background?
Okay. Abhayagiri, okay, there are many wrong views in Abhayagiri, right? Whenever we talk about like a 𝐾G, okay, when we talk about 𝐾G, that means someone's inferior teacher, we call 𝐾G. So whenever we learn something about 𝐾G, it will be Abhayagiri. Then when we talk about Acharya, it come from Mahavihara, Wasi, right? So the background is, maybe it will be a little bit messy, you know. At the time, the different camps support different sectors, different schools. That's why sometimes Mahavihara is powerful, sometimes Abhayagiri is powerful like that. It can be. Abhayagiri Wasi, Jetavana Wasi, right? They are also powerful sometimes. Okay, so I don't know many things about their background too much. I know very little bit, right? Very little. Maybe Sri Lanka people will know more. Okay.
文达米Siado 曾经说过 It says that Pao Siadoji has mentioned before, only focus onto the breath is not correct. One must focus Pao Siado mentioned before, only focus onto the touching point is not correct. One must focus onto the breath that goes through the touching point. But Siado just now says only knowing the touching point is okay. Why is that so?
Okay, actually, I just said 3. As long as you can know one of the 3, right? In breath, out breath, of the touching point, is it enough? Is it good, right? So if you can know for the touching and in breath, touching and out breath, it will be better. But not very convenient for all the people. Okay, Paul said also say according to his own experience. I also say my own experience. Maybe there is some different angle, different opinion. Okay, this one.
Vandami Siado, Anapanasati practitioner, when he walks, the breath will become faster and not calm. And in this condition, during the sitting meditation time, when he focuses onto the breath, then the breathing will become become grosser or heavier. So in this way, it will disturb the calmness. So 这种情况是属于 in this way, and would that call controlling of the breath? 还是情况 or this is the natural physiological phenomena and how to overcome it? Okay, means during walking time.
Okay, so as long as it's okay, that means natural breathing, right? So when walking, it will be a little bit faster. When sitting, it will be a little bit. Also, sometimes it will be a little bit gross. This just it will just normal. It doesn't matter. So as long as you can know natural breathing, it doesn't matter. Okay, it's correct. When you have to control something, or when you have to forcefully breathe in, breathe out, then it will be the problem. It's okay. We cannot say any mistakes. Huh?
The next question. Dear 𝐸𝐸𝐻, when we cannot feel the breath, could we just place our mind at the neutral area and wait for the breath to appear? What should we focus on during this time?
Okay, sure. So actually, sometimes if you cannot know the breathing, but we can also know something moving around nostril. We call it a touching sensation around nostril. We can also, at the time, we just know, we just feel it. We just try to know it. Your breath will reappear. Okay, practically, when your breath becomes very subtle, you may feel something like, without touching the body hair. So without touching the skin, you just touch body hair and move your finger. That kind of sensation can be around nostril. Very, very subtle sensation around nostril. That's the touching point. You can wait and watch there. You can know the breathing again. It will be more easy. It will be easier for you to maintain your concentrations. Okay.
Vietnamese 𝐸𝐸𝐻, can the 𝐸𝐸𝐻 explain how we can happy all the time and how to be free from worries and anxiety in our daily life? Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu.
So that is not that simple, right? Okay. It depends on what kind of happiness you wish. Okay. Some of the happiness will be just for a short time. Some of the happiness will be whole life. Okay. Even the Buddha gave many different types of happiness. Okay. Practically, some of the happiness will last only short times. After that, suffering will follow. So happiness followed by suffering, such as sensual pleasure. Happiness, after happiness, there can be suffering. For example, after eating, you have to wash clothes, clean the kitchen, all the suffering come after eating. This is the, happiness followed by suffering. So sometimes suffering followed by happiness. Okay, suffering followed by happiness. The one is, when we talk about suffering followed by happiness, and the one is, for example, meditation. In the very beginning, you may feel pain a lot. But after a long time sitting, after a long time habits, you will have very good concentrations, happiness. Right? This is one thing. Sometimes happiness follow happiness, like jhana attainment or path fruition attainment, that kind of things can be. So when you attain jhana, also happiness. When you enter jhana, also happiness, like that. Fruition attainment, sure, it's purely happiness, purely bliss. So it depends on what kind of happiness do you wish, right? The Buddha also mentioned many different types of happiness. For example, ati sukha. Now, this many people say, when we have many things in our hands, we say we are rich. It also can produce happiness, right? Sometimes we can use many things, many new things. For example, we call bhoga sukha. You can feel happiness. For that, we have to earn a lot of money, right? In order that you may be able to use many different things. Another one is ananya sukha, no debt. If we don't have debt, this is also happiness. The last one is the most important, blameless happiness. When we are doing good, when we are doing many good things, we will not have any regrets, any remorse. We will not blame ourselves. No wise people will blame us. Then this is called blameless happiness. So, okay, blameless happiness is more meaningful, more beneficial for our improvements. If we summarize, if the happiness can make you improve spiritually, then we can say the happiness is a true happiness. You don't need to worry about anything, no anxiety. Sometimes some of the happiness does not belong to us. For example, sensual pleasure, it does not belong to us. It just belong to other people. We must have second people or many other assistant, many other material for us to enjoy, right? It does not depend on ourselves. So, okay, all the happiness come from ourselves, although if we can live happily alone, then this is called real happiness. So you can find, okay?
Vandamisiado, how to overcome Tamanandraya?
Actually, if we have already done in the past, it's already karma, okay? But in this very life, we have this kind of problem, just have other people to meditate. This we can overcome Tamanandraya.
Vietnamese Sayadaw, in the other religion or other sect, while the ascetic people practice the break, they still can attain jhana, while they are not keeping basic precepts as the Buddha teaching. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu.
Okay, so it depends on their way of practice. For example, they may have achara sila, the traditional morality. Though some morality are very similar to 5 precepts, right? Then if they don't have basic precepts, they cannot attain jhana. When they have basic morality, then basic precepts, they can attain jhana. It depends on their achara sila, the traditional morality. Okay? Okay. Itawataja amehi sambadam bunya sambadam sabbe deva numodandu sabbe buddha numodandu sabbe satta numodandu sabba sambati siriya idam me nyadinam hodu sukhita hondu nyadayo idam me nyadinam hodu sukhita hondu nyadayo idam me nyadinam hodu Sukhita hondu nyadayo idame bunyam asawekaya waham hotu idame bunyam nibbanasa bhajayo hotu mama bunya bhagam sabhasadanam bhajami te sabbe me samam bunya bhagam labandu sadhu sadhu sadhu.